Hello, welcome to the latest from Iguacu. Thank you for joining us. Iguacu is your trusted source for effective overseas giving at weareiguacu.org, and we're bringing you an update from around the world, and our lead researchers will join you shortly from the research desk. Please feel free to post a question. You know, our research team have world-class research skills from top social science institutions. They lead months-long investigations into the world's serious crises so that you can take seconds to give effectively at weareiguacu.org. What this means is that we have a very deep expertise in the countries we cover. So I think you'll find our update today is a very fascinating insight into the crises around the world, and you benefit from the expertise of the amazing team at Iguacu and the wonderful network of experts around the world that inform our service. And there are more than 900 experts who donate their time to inform the Iguacu service, and they come from 31 countries from around the world. So thank you very much for joining us, and we'll shortly be joined by our first researcher from the research desk, Adib Chowdhury, who monitors natural disasters from around the world. And I'll just try to connect Adib now from Beirut, and we'll see how the internet connection is from where he is. And he'll be with us shortly, very successfully. Hello, Adib. How are you?
Hi, Catherine. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Very good, thank you. The connection's not so great. It's a little bit of a fault on the audio quality, but we'll see how we go. And if there's any difficulty, I can always read your script, or we'll work it out as we go along. What's the latest world of natural disasters?
All right, no problem. So as we know, there's an update from Papua New Guinea. And so as I was saying, on the 26th of February, what happened was Papua New Guinea was struck by a very large earthquake. And most of the casualties that occurred happened in the following few days due to the mudslides that happened. There were about 200 aftershocks that have happened over the past 40 days, some of which have measured 6.5. They've measured 6.5 magnitude. So these are very large aftershocks. And aid agencies took a long time responding because of the remote nature of the location which was affected, of the areas that were affected. And to make matters worse, the foreign media have barely picked up on the crisis that has happened. And the local government as well is struggling to supply resources. And so locals have been rioting the past couple of weeks now, it's been, due to the slow government response. In fact, there was a UN aid agency which actually pulled out due to the rioting that had happened. And as The Guardian reported just 2 days ago, there have been reports of children falling victim to gunshot wounds, unfortunately, in the area. And UNICEF, in fact, before the earthquake struck, reported that children were at a high risk of violence, with it was roughly about 75% experiencing abuse in their lifetime. And so this has been an issue before the earthquake, and MSF recently reported that there were 12,000 casualties cases of family and sexual violence treated in Hellah province. And so schools have been closed, and so what UNICEF has been doing the past couple of weeks to compensate for this is that they have opened up educational support centers, as well as providing psychological support for the children who have been affected, and just carrying on supporting the local population, because there's a lot of frustration happening right there, and so they're providing this essential facility to them.
Okay, Adib. Now, the audio quality was variable from what I can hear. It might be different for our audience. But let me just reiterate a couple of things in case it wasn't completely clear. So, as I understand it, children have been heavily affected as a result of the disaster and the aftershocks, of which there have been many, up to 6.5 on the Richter scale in the last 40 days. And but then preceding the disaster, there was a significant level of violence affecting children generally in the areas that were affected by the earthquake. In response, the earthquake itself has led to the closure of schools, I'm assuming, from the destruction and the mudslides. Okay, so in response to the disaster, part of the response has been to effectively address the trauma of the disaster, but also address the psychosocial needs that pre-existed the earthquake. Is that right?
Absolutely. Okay. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. I just wanted to, a couple of the words there I couldn't quite hear, and you were referring to rioting that was happening as a result of the lack of response to the disaster and the needs of the disaster. That then led to rioting, and that led to violence against the children. Sorry, the word rioting I couldn't quite capture, and I just want to check that our audience gets the full meaning of what you're saying. And especially as the global media have not been following this story very closely. So it is important that we do our part to help spread of what's going on. So thanks for that full report, Adib.
Absolutely.
Very good.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Awesome. Thank you, and see you next week.
Thanks, Adib. Bye for now.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Very good. So I hope that was all able to be clearly communicated to you from Beirut there. Next to join us is Nathaniel Shiraki, and Nathaniel is our lead researcher for the Middle East, and I'll just attempt here to bring him onto the camera, and we'll get an update from Nat on what's happening in Syria. Hello, Nat. How are you?
Catherine.
Hi.
How are you?
Very good, thank you. Thank you. Did you want to start with Syria? What the latest terrible news from Syria? And
of course, yes. Unfortunately, the main news this week on Syria is the suspected chemical weapon attack on the last pocket of eastern Ghouta, you know, this besieged area near Damascus that is held by the opposition. According to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, at least 80 people were killed, including 40 who died from suffocation. Now, our recommended charity, the Syrian American Medical Society, SAMS, is on the ground. They have themselves documented 43 deaths. Though the way it happened, according to SAMS, is that before the chemical weapon attack, there were a round of other attacks that systematically targeted medical facilities and rescue teams. As a result, a lot of ambulances and rescue vehicles were destroyed, and the medical capacity of the city was paralyzed.
So this is prior to the chemical attack. This was already...
That is prior to the chemical attack that happened on Saturday, immediately after at 7:45 p.m. Local time. 500 people were brought to local health facilities, mostly, according to SAMS, to quote them, women and children. And many of them were suffering from symptoms indicative of exposure to a chemical agent, potentially a sarin gas. The symptoms are various, but it's mainly respiratory distress. One patient was declared dead on arrival. A lot of the rescue teams were not able to evacuate the bodies in several parts of the city because of the intensity of the odor and the lack of protection equipment. According to a neurosurgeon from SAMS, it's not a surprise that this attack was perpetrated at night because during the night, the civilians in eastern Ghouta tend to hide in basements to avoid avoid airstrikes. Gas is heavier than air down there, and this increases the number of casualties. This is the analysis of this neurosurgeon from SAMS who treated patients in Idlib during the last chemical weapon attack. The Assad regime and its allies, Russia and Iran, are suspected of being behind the attack. This is not the first time chemical weapons are reportedly being used against civilians in opposition-controlled areas of Syria. The last major incident of that sort that's internationally recognized was in Idlib exactly a year ago in the city of Han Shehun, with a number of casualties and fatalities as well. United Nations Security Council's resolutions have so far failed to stop this from happening. Indeed, even before this attack, our recommended charity SAMS said that several poison gas attacks of a more limited scopes were recorded during the current offensive on the besieged area of eastern Ghouta. A few hours after the attack in the enclave, the last of the three rebel groups that were holding the besieged area, decided that they would leave and that they would evacuate, and they started evacuating along with their families and other civilians off to the northwestern region of Idlib. When the evacuation is complete, it will mean that the formerly besieged area will pass under full control of the regime. It will also mark the end of a 7-week-long offensive that killed at least 1,600 people.
Okay, thank you, Nat. We'll learn more as the week passes with regards to the nature of the attack. I understand that various investigative sources are seeking to learn more and document exactly the details of the attack, and they're having difficulty getting access to the area. But as we learn more, we'll be updating our platform. Anyone can look at our Twitter
Obviously,
page.
We'll be monitoring that very closely, and we'll keep you updated on all the developments related to that matter.
Very good. Thank you very much, Nat. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Catherine. Bye.
Bye.
See you next week.
Bye. Just joining with us next is our lead researcher from Central Africa, Blondine Sidinier. So let me see if I can connect with Blondine, and I believe she will have an update for us on South Sudan. And I just looking out there, if any of you have any questions, please, we encourage you to ask any question covering any of our crises and any of our charities. Hello, Blondine, how are you?
Hi, Catherine.
I believe you have an update for us on South Sudan.
Yes, the former Army Chief of Staff, Paul Melong, launched a rebel group. He was sacked in May 2017 and placed under house arrest amid fear that he could organize a rebellion. He was eventually freed in November following intense negotiations, and he has since been a vocal critic about the government. He was part of the coalition of groups in power, and his rebellion means the coalition is breaking down. Launching a rebel group is a strategy for him to gain a seat at the negotiating table and therefore benefit from a future peace in South Sudan. He is accused by the international community of gross human rights violations and to have fed the ethnic narrative of the conflict in the country. In addition, he has been sanctioned by the United States. In addition, over the weekend, one aid worker was killed in the north of the country. At least 98 aid workers have been killed in South Sudan since conflict broke out in 2013.
98?
98, okay. Yes.
That's a huge number. Thank you so much for that update. Is there anything you wanted to share with us this week on the Central African Republic?
Yes, on Saturday, the UN mission in the Central African Republic launched a joint operation with the National Army to disarm armed groups in one of the neighborhoods of the capital, Bangui. This operation came after that local residents urged the UN to intervene as armed groups claiming to defend them were really abusing the population. The joint operation was triggered after that negotiations failed. Clashes killed at least 3 people and wounded another 50. The neighborhood in question where the operation was launched is the economic lung of the capital, Bangui, and insecurity as well as illegal taxes imposed by armed groups is a serious source of concern as it's impeding economic activities. In addition, another news in retaliation on Sunday, one of the UN base in Bangui was attacked.
And we're talking about, one of the most impoverished countries in the world. And so when their most important economic quarter in the capital is under attack in this way, it has serious consequences for the whole country. It has an unusual name, the neighborhood, PK5. Do you have any idea why it has such an odd name? Well, sorry.
Yes, absolutely. It's because PK5, it's actually for kilometer 5. So it's 5 kilometers from the center point of Bangui. And so that's how you can call neighborhoods in Bangui, based on how far they are from that point zero.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I was curious. Brilliant. Well, thanks for that update, Blondine. And
thank you, Catherine. See you next week. Bye for now.
Bye. Very good. So we'll move from Central Africa now to Myanmar and the border with Bangladesh. And I'm just going to bring on our lead researcher from Myanmar and Haiti, Kirsty Aventurine. And I believe Kirsty's about to join us and has an update for you on the Rohingya crisis. Hello, Kirsty.
Hi, Catherine.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Very good, thank you. I believe you have some news on the Rohingya crisis.
Yes. So last weekend, 5 Rohingya were rescued at sea off the island of Sumatra in Indonesia. They had departed with 5 other Rohingya who unfortunately did not make it during this perilous journey. Right groups have said that they expect the numbers of Rohingya attempting the dangerous journey to increase in the next months or weeks. In fact, earlier last week, another group of Rohingya refugees leaving this time from Cox's Bazar had been rescued by the Malaysian authorities. And this group was composed of 30 Rohingya adults and at least 20 Rohingya children. So now the situation inside Rakhine State is still pretty grim. In fact, Rohingya living there are facing many hardships. They have difficulties accessing basic services such as healthcare and access to food and livelihoods, and which also their restrictions of movement is there's a lot of restrictions of movement, which is also affecting their capacity to earn a living and feed their families. Another interesting piece of news on the Rohingya crisis is that Facebook has come under severe criticism recently for failing to prevent the number of anti-Rohingya hate speech posted on the media platform. Studies have shown that there's been a correlation between the scale of violence and the number of hate speech and even fake news at the onset of the crisis. And one thing to know is that the Myanmar population relies heavily on Facebook as a main source of news. Another study has showed that over 70% of the population use Facebook as dominant source of news. Since the matter hit the news, the founder of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, has acknowledged the failure in Facebook systems and promised to tackle the issue of hate speech on the platform.
Great, thank you, Kirsty. Thank you for that update. And we'll see you next week. Thank you.
See you next week.
Great. This broadcast is for you, and we'd love to respond to the particular interests that you might have in the world of Iguacu and the crises we cover. It might be that you have a question about effective giving generally. What have we learned about what makes an effective charity on the ground? If you're not aware of what Iguacu does, our core service is to identify effective charities in the world's serious humanitarian crisis. Now, why do we do that? Because when you hear about great need in the world and you wish to help and you go online trying to find an effective charity, it can be really a difficult process. Very few people have the kind of time to wade through the many different charity websites, understand how on earth they can compare effectiveness in a particular crisis, There isn't any international documentation, or you can compare. There are no international accounting standards. These crises where there is serious need tend to be very complex and fast moving. So, really, it's very difficult for a member of the public to be able to determine how to give with impact, how to give with confidence, which is the right charity in a particular crisis. And the whole point of Iguacu is to remove that frustration and to make sure that you can give effectively where the needs are critical. So we encourage you to visit weareiguacu.org and give through Iguacu and give with confidence where the needs are critical around the world. Well, that's it for this week. Thank you very much for joining us and wishing you a great week. Bye for now.